Welcome back to NY Flight Jets Talk. On this stream, we are joined by Hall of Famer and Jets legend, Mr. Marty Lyons. Mr. Lyons, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Connor. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for doing this with us. We really appreciate it. First time on the show. Hopefully not the last. So, you ready to get into it?
I'm ready when you are.
What were your favorite memories from being a part of the iconic sack exchange?
Well, to be remembered so many years after the fact and to look back and realize what the front four was able to accomplish, but also the back seven. We had great
Yes.
linebackers, we had a great secondary, and we had a defense coordinator that believed in making the right calls. And as you got ready to go into a game, it wasn't, hey, how many times are you going to get to the quarterback? Uh, it was, we're going to hit the quarterback and we're going to get there. And when you have two guys like we were fortunate to have in Mark Gastineau and Joe Klecko that had the
Yes.
speed and ability to get around the corner. You couldn't double team both of them. So you look back and you cherish those moments because it's something that will never go away and something you can share with your teammates.
I agree. I mean, sack exchange is just that front four is one of just the most iconic groups in NFL history. I mean, the most iconic group in Jets history, especially NFL history. What was it like when you guys visited the stock exchange in New York City?
Well, you know what, Connor? It was like time stopped because the trading on the floor actually stopped. And, to see it on TV, to see the exchange on the floor, to be able to ring the bell down there. Again, it's one of those special moments that you don't want to live in the past, but you hold on to the past. And
Yes.
again, that was an exciting moment for all four of us.
I mean that just iconic, iconic. So moving on. Obviously, Hall of Fame inductee we have on the show right here, Mr. Marty Lyons. What were your emotions like when you found out you were getting inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Well, I went into the College Hall of Fame in 2011. I was very fortunate to be the presenter for Joe Klecko last year going into the NFL Hall of Fame. So to be the presenter for Joe was just, it was heartwarming because he had so many teammates that he could pick and choose from for him to say, hey, you know what? I respect you as a player, but more importantly, years after the fact, I respect you as a friend. And that meant so much. When I went into the College Football Hall of Fame, I kind of looked back at it and I said, wow, how fortunate and blessed I was to play for Coach Bryant, had great teammates. We lost 6 games in 4 years, and to be part of a winning tradition at the University of Alabama, I wanted to share it with my family, my teammates, and especially the fans down there in Alabama. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, just that must have been a very exciting moment for you, as it should for anyone who ever receives a phone call like that. Iconic, iconic. Going back to one of the most historic penalties in NFL history, how many people ask you about the giving him the business penalty?
Well, quite a few, especially if it's the week of the Buffalo game. And I run into Jim Kelly all the time. We're friends and we talk about it. And it was one of those things, Connor, that I was on top of him. And,
Yes.
a few words got exchanged and I started hitting him and he started hitting me. And, next thing you know, it was giving him the business. And they actually blamed it on Mark at first. They called it on number 99. And then they kind
Yes.
of panned over to me. And at that time, I was bleeding a little bit from the uh, right eye. And Jim Kelly would later tell me that during the football season, he would keep his index finger, the fingernail, a little bit longer than the rest of the nails so that when he went to throw the ball, he got the proper spin on it. So when he came up to my face mask, that's how my face got cut.
I mean, just legendary penalty, one of the most historic penalties in NFL history. The giving him the business call between the great Marty Lyons and Jim Kelly. NY Jets superfan has a question for you, Mr. Lyons. Marty, was Gastineau robbed of Defensive Player of the Year in his 2022 22-sack season?
He might have been. Um, you know, uh, when the sports writers vote or the players vote, we're not any part of that. So, Mark was a tremendous player. And
Yes.
I'm not going to point the finger as saying that he was robbed or he wasn't robbed. I don't think that, I should make that decision. It's the people that watch the game, that enjoy the game. And certainly he had the numbers. He had 22 sacks that season. So that's an incredible number. He was an outstanding athlete. And anytime that he lined up on the field, it enhanced our ability to win the game.
I mean, the great Mark Gastineau, he was a legend. I mean, obviously he was a part of the sack exchange. You, Joe Klecko, Mark Gastineau, and Abdul Salam. I mean, just legendary. Um, who was the most underrated player you played with in your career?
Most underrated player. I mean, you can look at Kenny Shroy as a defensive back. He had a tremendous career, but never really got to that limelight that he deserved. Freeman McNeil was an outstanding running back, and
Insane
uh,
running back.
everything that he established, he should have gotten more credit. Mickey Schuler, probably the best tight end that the New York Jets have ever had, unless you go back to Richard Castor, who was a
Yes.
hybrid type of player. I
Rest in
think
peace.
that, yeah, I don't think Mickey got all the credit that he deserved. Some of the other players, like Bob Crable, got cheated out of a career. Was a number one draft choice coming out of Notre Dame, and had two or three non-contact injury knee surgery and just ended his career way too early because he was an outstanding player. So, I mean, kind of really the names can go on and on and on. Bobby Jackson, Jerry Holmes. We had quite a few players that we really thought that we had enough talent to go to the playoffs and then make it to the Super Bowl, but it just never happened. We got to that AFC Championship game, and unfortunately, Richard had a bad day, and the defense gave up 7 points, and you end up losing 14-0. And like anything, they give you a pat on the back and they go, "Don't worry, we'll get them next year." And unfortunately, life in the NFL is not that easy
You
because
live
there's
to survive another
no team's going to be the same. The
day.
2023 New York Jets will not be the same as the 2024. It's just the business aspect of it. The draft choices come in. Every time you have draft choices, that means players that are on the team now, some of them are going to have to move on because you only have a certain amount of space to keep your players.
I agree, guys. I see you guys asking some questions in the chat. We'll get to those in a minute. But Mr. Lyons, going to the Jets 2023 season, obviously the defensive line had a lot of success. We bring back defensive line coach Aaron Whitecutt, and I mean Bryce Huff, great year. Obviously, a free agent right now, which causes some drama, so to speak. Solomon Thomas had a very solid year. Jermaine Johnson, all those guys, great year. What do you think made this 2023 Jets defensive line so successful?
Well, I think it's a combination of players being hungry. You look at Quinnen Williams, I think he's the leader of the defensive line, but Jermaine Johnson came in and he wanted to prove a point, changed his number to go back to his college number, came in and played with an attitude. Michael Clemens, I think he's just a few plays away from really getting to be a good player in the NFL. And of course, Solomon Thomas, he's so consistent. You got John Franklin Myers. These guys are all good. And the way that they rotate them in, and Aaron, the coach, does a great job coaching them. And I'm fortunate as a defensive lineman before the game, I try to go down there and spend time with each one of them and talk to them. And if I see something on the film the week before, I try to tell them what they did wrong, what they have to do this week against the competition, but I'm not there to coach them because they all know that I have a responsibility up there doing the radio, that if they do
Yes.
make a mistake, I got to point it out. And I'm not trying to be negative in any
I
way.
agree.
I am just trying to be honest for the listeners, because the one thing that Bob and I have to do, you have to paint the picture if you're on the radio. You have to have your listeners envision what you're trying to say. And I'm the first one to criticize them, and I'm the first one to give them a hug after the game and let them know, hey, it's all right. You know what? Next week, you always have next week. And nobody's going to have a perfect game. That's the key. You don't have a perfect game. What you want to do is you want to win 75% of every play that you're in there. You want to have a winning play with a winning attitude.
I agree. And going back to what you mentioned about the radio, you and Bob are incredible on the radio. I just want to let you guys know. I listened to 3 games on the radio this year when I wasn't able to be home and watch the game. It was week 4 against the Chiefs. I listened to most of the second half of that game on the radio, and that was a very good game. Although we lost, I mean Zach played a great game. It was a good overall game. I listened to part of the week 3 game, so back to back weeks, part of the week 3 game against the Patriots, which was just not a great overall game.
It was
And
like
then,
watching paint dry. Yeah.
yes,
And,
and then
and you know, you look at the Kansas City game, they lost 23-20, but they actually spotted them 17 points. It was 17-0 at a blink of an eye.
mhm.
And then
and
they
then
came back. But that showed you what type of character this team is made up of, what type of players that they have. And what was
yeah,
that third game?
the third game was the Giants game, and that was, I mean, it was came down in the last second. Oh, Lazard catches it. Can he spike it? 1 second on
Yeah,
the clock. He gets the spike off, and then obviously we send Greg the leg out there, and he just
yeah,
incredible year from him. We send it to overtime. We marched down the field in overtime, kick the game-winning field goal. I mean, that was there were games that we should have won and we should have lost. I think that Giants game
yeah.
deserved to be a tie. I don't think anyone deserved to win that game the way both teams played.
Well, if you look at that game, remember in the fourth quarter when the Jets were down and the Giants, it was 4th and 1, I believe. They could have tried to run and pick up a first down. If they ran it, pick up first down, the game's over. The Jets lose. But they went out, tried to kick the field goal. Their kicker, he had a problem with his kicking leg. They missed the field goal, and then the Jets go all the way down to score. So there's a lot of games that the Jets could have won, but also on the other side, there's a lot of games that they could have lost, and one being the New York Giants. I think the one thing that they have to figure out this year is that at the bye week they were 3-3, and then you go into the bye week, you regroup, you got to feel good about where you are, and then you come out and you go 4-8.
Yeah.
Why after a bye week do you now go 4-8 when you should feel refreshed? I know it was an early bye, but if you turn the clock back a year, they were in a good position in 2022 at the bye, and then they lost all those games at the end of the year to go 7-10. So that's the number one thing, beside trying to find out how they can keep the players healthy, and then find out, okay, what are we doing during the bye week that when we come out of the bye week, the players aren't, it's not that they're not playing, we're just not winning games.
I mean, I agree. If you look at the Giants game, for the offensive line, that was the turning point of the season when all those guys went down. I mean, we were on our third center. Yeah, third center,
Yeah,
Xavier Newman, I remember. And then one possession, it might have been a possession in the third. Yeah, I think it was in the third quarter. He snapped the ball over Zach's head, and that forced a turnover. I mean, he shouldn't have done that, but I mean, it was his first time getting reps at the center position, so you can't really blame him. I mean, McGovern went down that game. Schweitzer went down that game. Who else?
yeah.
There was
But you
one
know what you
tackle.
did
Yeah.
establish? You established one player that's going to be here for years, and that's Joe Tipman. He
Oh,
is a he is a quality player. And if the Jets can ever figure out how to get Elijah Vera Tucker where he can play a full season, that young man's going to be an all-pro. He has the ability. What they have to do is just keep him in one spot. Let him play the guard position. Don't try to move him out to tackle. But he has so much athletic ability, and he wants to win so much for this organization. he's willing to make those switches. But there's another young man, if they can get him healthy and they can get him out there on the field for 17 games, he'll go to the Pro Bowl and the Jets will win a lot more games.
I agree. Personally, I mean this is up for debate, but I personally think that we should just keep him at guard and find a tackle. I, I'd rather bring in like I'd rather bring in. I think we need two new tackles for next year. So I'd rather draft Olu Fashanu, a Tylise Funga type of guy, and then maybe sign. I don't know. Not a lot of people are too big on Jonah Williams. I personally like Jonah Williams. I wouldn't go after a Bakhtiari type of guy. What bothers me is him missing games because of turf. I can definitely see him doing that because he is the biggest guy who's anti-turf. Oh my god, it causes all these injuries. I mean, he has the right to have that opinion, but I don't think he'd even want to come and play on this MetLife turf.
Well, you know what? A lot of people have criticized that turf, but when you look at two teams that play on it and the amount of traffic, you can't really have a natural grass field. But I think maybe in 2025 coming up, they may convert it to natural grass now that they got the World Cup in soccer in
Yes.
2026, and that has to be played on grass. So there's a good
Hmm.
opportunity that this may be the last year that you're going to see turf in MetLife Stadium, and they may just convert it next year and then have that grass grow in.
I hope they do. I mean, I'm not I haven't done enough research where I can say turf causes all these injuries, but I do think it definitely plays a role in the effect of some of these injuries. I mean, some people were saying that Elijah Vera Tucker's injury was almost fully caused because of the turf. I mean, we had a lot of
Uh,
guys get hurt at Mile High Stadium over in Denver. I don't know. I think a lot of going back to the Vera Tucker, a lot of people are saying don't put him at tackle because he got hurt at tackle. I personally don't think it even has anything to do where he was playing. I think it was just wrong place at the wrong
yeah.
time, poor
And,
luck, and that can be the case.
yeah, and I agree with you. I think his natural position is guard. But when you get back to looking at grass and turf, I think the new collective bargaining is actually hurting the players, where that
Mm,
they don't get in football shape. You only have three preseason games. You only limited so many amount of practices to get ready. And then if you're a starter, you're not playing in any preseason games, or maybe you take a snap or a
mm.
quarter, and then all of a sudden week one you're supposed to flip it on and get in, you know, that game ship mode of, hey, I'm ready to go. And you look at the early part of the season, week 1 through 4, how many players are getting hurt, whether it's on turf or it's on grass. Now, I think if everybody had the ability to play on a perfect grass field, they would want to.
Yes.
But I don't think that, a lot of times when you get injured, I mean, there are non contact injuries that happen on both grass and turf. And I think the problem with the turf getting criticized is there's so many more fields now that are
Mm.
synthetic grass. So, Connor, if you're playing and you get hurt on a natural grass field, you go through the rehab process. And the next thing you know, you come to MetLife and you're ready to play. And the first play, you get hurt. Now, who's taking the blame for that? The synthetic grass because you got hurt again? Or do you go all the way back to when the injury occurred and it occurred on natural grass? So there's where did you get hurt? How long did you rehab? And then where did you get hurt the second time? You got to the players have got to start tracking that. You can't just point your finger and say that's bad turf. There, it may be. I'm not questioning how some of the players feel, but all I know is better than the turf I had to play on. I had to
Yep.
play on the old knitted nylon, which had that generic name of AstroTurf. And when that stuff got hot, it got sticky, and you got turf burns. And when it got
Oh,
wet, it got slippery. So I think with today's technology, the fields are better than what they used to be. But there's nothing. I will tell you this: nothing better. 100% grass. If you can keep that grass and maintain that grass and make sure that it's playable from week 1 to week 17. It's hard to do that in the Northeast because now you're dealing with a living organism. That when that grass gets temperamental and it's not getting enough rain, it dies. When the root zone dies, you can't get the grass back.
I think that's one of the reasons the MetLife converted to turf because they're like, it's so much more money and effort also to maintain a grass field. Rather turf, it's not as hard to maintain.
Well, it's hard to make. You have to maintain both. But the thing with natural grass is there's so many things that can disrupt its growth. It could come. You could get a virus in it. You could get a fungus in it. It's not getting enough water. It's not getting enough heat. Here in the Northeast, it's very, very hard to control the growth of grass
Yeah,
anywhere from probably November to then the end of the season.
I agree. All right, moving on. Going back to the defensive line, what do you think it will take for the Jets to bring back Bryce Huff?
I think it just makes a commitment. I mean, you know what? There's not going to be you know, Price is not going to give them a discount, nor should he. This is the NFL. He's a quality defensive end. He's a quality rusher. Could he get more sacks if they didn't rotate? I think every one of them could. You could probably tack 2 or 3 more sacks on to every player. In a selfish way, I never like to come out of the game. But
Yeah,
now you're going in there for a series, then you can stay in there for another series, and next thing you know, they're pulling you out.
I agree. The rotation of the defensive line is kind of interesting because you'll see guys stay in for maybe one play and then come out for the rest of the possession, and then they'll play the whole possession next drive. It's
Yeah.
interesting the way they rotate guys in and out. But Bryce Huff, I think, is gonna go after whoever pays him most. He already said that after the Patriots game, and also where he can get the most snaps. So maybe let's say the Jets offer him $18 million a year, maybe, and the I'm making it up. The Eagles offer him $15 million a year. If the Eagles or whatever team that wants to pay him are gonna end up playing him more, I think he'll go to the team that's gonna want to pay him more. I think money has a factor, but I think it really comes down to how much he plays.
Well, you know what? Money's always going to be a factor. That's the factor now with free agency and how everybody has changed the game. Uh, Again, you don't give a hometown discount because, one day you're here, the next day you're not. Um, so I think he's going to be selective. If I was him, I would be two things would be in my mind. Number one, how much am I going to get paid? And two, the team that I go to, what are my chances of getting to the Super Bowl? Because the money's going to be there, Connor, wherever he goes. He's going to get paid a certain amount of money that he deserves. But the big thing is, you want to go somewhere.
I think we're losing. We can't hear you. Well, Mr. Lyons? Mr. Lyons, I think we might have. Oh, wait. It says your mic is not connected. Sorry, I don't think we can hear you.
How about now?
Yeah, I got you back now.
Okay, I apologize. Somehow my
Of course, it's
microphone
fine.
went off.
Oh, it's fine.
But like I was saying, the players now that go into free agency, they take into consideration, yeah, I want to get paid, but I want to go to a team that's maybe one step, one player away from going to the Super Bowl. I want the ring. I'm going to get the money, but I want the ring.
I agree, but I mean, all things aside, if the Jets bring him back or not, undrafted free agent like Joe Douglas's biggest find, him or Quincy. Quincy obviously off waivers from Jacksonville. Those two guys, both on the defensive side of the ball, are just remarkable finds for Joe Douglas. Staying with Joe Douglas, what do you think needs to happen to bring Saleh and Douglas back for 2025?
Very simple. You got to win. Whether you make it, it'd be great to make it to the playoffs and win your division. You have to you have to make it to the playoffs. Bottom line, it's a win business, Connor. You go 7-10, 7-10. All of a sudden, the fans are not going to show up anymore. The fans are going, and the New York Jet fans, one of the most loyal group you ever want to meet.
I
They're
agree.
be they're behind you when you're winning, and they let you know when you're not winning, and they let you know when you're playing bad. But every one of them knows the game of football. So for Salah, I think Rob's a great guy, and I have a great deal of confidence in Rob Salah and that combination of Joe Douglas. But that's just me. The bottom line is if you don't win and you don't make it to the playoffs this year, I think that Woody Johnson is going to make a change.
I agree. Woody, personally, I don't find him as the most hands-on type of owner, not so much as like a Jerry Jones guy. Like Jerry Jones is going to be the general manager and the owner of the Cowboys. I think Woody Johnson makes moves when they're necessary, but he's not someone who's pushing to get someone out of a job. I think, like, I have a question for you, Mr. Lyons. Let's say we make the wild card round and we lose in the wild card round. Do you see them coming back, or do you think we need to make a lengthy slash deep playoff run, so to speak?
But Con, let me ask you this: how many games did Aaron Rodgers play?
Not even one, zero.
No, no, but you're saying next year they make it to the wild card.
Oh, how
How
many
many
games?
games did he play? How
Uh,
many injury? All that will go into
yeah.
the evaluation. Of how many players got hurt. What was our record? Where were we at midway through the season? Did we finish strong or did we just get to the finish line? And that's why we didn't win the division and we had to go in as a wild card. What happened? And then we made it as a wild card and we lose. I think that all goes into the mix of what Woody Johnson's, and I think it rightfully so, it should go into the mix before you make any emotional decision. If you let go Rob Sala and Joe Douglas next year, Rob Sala will be in his fourth year, right? You got young players that are now maybe coming up for eligibility for free agency. Where's the stability at the top? You can't keep changing coaches. You got to find the right coach, give him the confidence, take the good with the bad. You got a good GM in Joe Douglas. Has he missed on some hits, on some draft choices? Certainly. Everybody does that. But you got to have the stability at the top. And I think right now with Rob Sala, Joe Douglas, Jaime, Eric Gelfand, they got all the people at the top that are right. But the bottom line is if the product on a Sunday, a Saturday, a Thursday night, they do not win, then all those guys, their job is at jeopardy.
I agree. Personally, I think the Jets are going to have to win a game in the playoffs in order for this group to return. But you did mention some very good points there that they do have to take into consideration. I don't know. Maybe Aaron Rodgers has another freak injury and is out for the year. I hope not. But maybe that does happen. I think that starts with finding a serviceable backup quarterback who we think
Yeah.
can we don't. So there's two different mindsets for a backup quarterback. Some people say you don't want to see him at all, but you want to be confident if he ever has to come into the game. Or some people say I want to see him a lot in the fourth quarter when we're up 4 to 5 touchdowns. So either one of those would work, but I think it starts with getting a backup quarterback that we really trust, and some other moves that need to take place in order for this team to have a deep playoff run. That leads me to my next question. What are the moves that you think need to be made for this team to go far in the playoffs?
Well, the first one is what you just mentioned. You got to find a backup quarterback. Uh, Zach Wilson's a great kid. I hope he has a great career. It's just not going to be here in New York. And
I
I
agree.
think that the backup that you bring in, you shouldn't have to adapt the offensive game plan or the offensive scheme of Aaron Rodgers if he gets hurt. I mean, that's the offense. Everybody needs to run it. If it's too sophisticated for the backup quarterback to run it, and the only quarterback that can run it is Aaron,
It's not working.
it's the wrong one. It's the wrong one. Because you go through OTAs, you go through training camp, everybody's learning, and then Aaron gets hurt after 4 plays the very first game, and now you have to change the offensive game plan. Your plan B should be I need to bring in a quarterback that, even though he's not like Aaron, he can play like Aaron and he can play with the same type of game plan or scheme. I think you need to get offensive tackles, as you said, and I think you need to get another playmaker to complement Garrett Wilson. The defensive side, I think, is pretty good if you can lock those safeties up. The corners, DJ Reed had an excellent year. Sauce Gardner, that speaks for itself. Front seven with Quinnen Williams, and your linebackers, you probably have the best duo at linebackers in
I
CJ
agree.
Mosley and Quincy Williams. Those guys play. There's no throttling down when they hit somebody. And if you're sitting up there in the press box and you see Derrick Henry come around the corner and you see CJ Mosley coming and it's a head-on collision, my money's on CJ because he's going to run right through you. Now, does CJ, he has a problem every now and then getting matched up with a tight end. Sometimes there's good and sometimes there's bad. But that's the leader of that defense. That's the captain I want to play alongside him.
That's exactly what I was going to say next. I mean, a lot of people were getting on Mosley for not having his best year this year. I think he's a top player on this team. And I think also that's something that's so important is the leadership. He is the leader of this, I think, whole team. I mean, some might argue Aaron Rodgers is, as he's 40-year-old veteran quarterback who's one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. But if you look at CJ Mosley, I mean, he's just a leader. I remember the first game, I think 2019 it was, or 2018, when we first signed him from the Ravens. He didn't have any interceptions that game, but I mean, he was just, I think it was week 1 of the season. He was just tearing up the field. I mean, deflection after deflection. And
Yeah,
like, speaking of not getting a lot of interceptions, but just tearing up the game. I mean, look at Sauce Gardner, 0 interceptions. Some might look of it. Some people who don't know ball that well might look at him and go, "Oh, 0 interceptions. He can't play." Yeah, he can. He's a first team All Pro. No one threw him the ball, and when they threw him the ball, he was super effective. So I don't think that interception kind of line for any defensive player really tells the full story.
yeah, you know what, Connor? I would agree with you. And I think the same goes with sacks. You
Mhm.
look at Quentin Williams, his sack numbers were down, but I talked to him, I think, after week 3 or 4, and I said, the reason why you're not getting back there to the quarterback is you're getting double teamed. And I said, when you get double teamed, that's a sign of respect. So now, you got to go over and talk to Solomon Thomas and say, hey, you know what? Hey, they're double teaming me. So you got a two-way go with that guard. And then you got to get your edge rushers to split out a little bit more so you could come around the corners. So what you're doing is you're creating gaps. the gap between the guard and the tackle, and the gap on like a Solomon Thomas side in between the center and the guard, and then on the other side between the guard and the tackle. But they got a lot of quality people. You know, you look at the offensive side. You know, I think if you took Tyler Conklin and you put him out there with a Patrick Mahomes, he'd have the same number. That guy
I
has
agree.
incredible hands. He can block, and he's out there playing every single week. His backup, Jeremy Rucker, he's a tough kid. He got dinged up at the end of the year with a concussion. So, you know, kind of you throw that all into the mix and you look back and you go, wow, now I can see why the team was 7-10. But the difference between this year and the year before when they went 7-10, there wasn't a lot of finger pointing. And you know what? Everybody was in it all together. I do believe, like Aaron Rodgers says, going forward, if you have something to say positive, or if you have something negative to say about the team or your teammates, be man enough to put your name to it. Stand up. Don't have an anonymous name, anonymous person in the locker room
Yep.
said this. Because you know what that does, Connor? Creates dissension. Because now everybody's in the locker room going, oh, wow, was that Connor that said that? No, Connor said he didn't say it. Well, Connor might have said it. You know, and it bounces back and forth. Just put your name to it. Own it.
I
And then
agree.
move on.
I agree. That's what I think is so just important. Just own up to the mistake. I mean, there's
Right.
so the, it, I
But
think
you know what, Connor? You're not asking these players to do anything different
yes.
than what you have to do in life. We're all going to make mistakes in life. We're all going to, you know, opportunities and choices are going to happen to us in life. And we're not going to always make the right choice, but own it. That's the only way you get better. Own what you say and own the actions that you do.
I agree. I think the locker room was in a very low place. I mean, you would know more than me as you're in the building a lot of the time. I mean, obviously analyst for 98.7 color commentator, but I the locker room must have been at an all-time low when we were going through that streak where we just were not scoring points. Obviously, we had it was the Chargers game was not
Yeah,
good, and then the Raiders game right after that, and then we had the Falcons game, which was literally like a dogfight who could like score the least amount of points because no one was
right.
scoring, and then what were some? There were the Patriots game. I mean, not all consecutively, and then we have that great game against the Texans, and Zach throws for 300 yards, and we're like, oh my god. Zach, I don't care. Zach played great. Screw the tank. Let's try to win this Miami game
Yeah,
and put Aaron Rodgers back in at home on Christmas Eve. And then no, we go out against the Dolphins and we score 0 points and lose 30-0 and have 3 yards of total offense at halftime. And
right,
Zach's out of the
right,
game with a concussion and
right.
played probably his last snap in a Jet uniform. So there's highs and lows. You go from that great Texans performance to oh my god, we just lost by 30 points to the Dolphins. We're officially eliminated from the playoffs. The playoff chances were slim going into that game, but they weren't zero. They were slim, but they weren't zero. And that Dolphins game put us over our edge. And then after that, we had the Commanders game where we were incredible first half. I mean, play after play, whether Tony Adams interception, Jermaine Johnson block punt, Brees Hall great game. Going into the locker room up 14 points or something, we come out, we go down at a point, and then we have to put Greg the Leg out there to kick a game-winning field goal.
Yeah,
See, it's you go from so high to so low to back up high to back down low. It's a roller coaster of a season for NFL players, to say the very least.
yeah. Every game's going to be like that until you get to the point where you're consistent. And you've got to go into the game thinking that, especially for an offensive lineman, defensive lineman, the guy across from you is only going to be as good as you let him be. It's a battle up front. You're talking
Yes.
about that far away from a guy wanting to take your head off and you're trying to take his head off. And it's a battle. That's why I said earlier, you know, you're not going to win every play, but if you can win 70, 75% of the team, you gain, I mean, plays, you give your teammates and you give your team an opportunity to win. I think they got the personnel. They got to find some personnel. And the old saying, you got to start fast and you got to finish strong. And you look at Kansas City, the way that they have finished. Some people, they limped into the playoffs. They had to play all their playoff games on the road. You got people that believe in one another. And until somebody beats them, Patrick Mahomes might be the quarterback that everybody's going to say, wow, there's the next Tom Brady.
I agree, Mr. Lyons. Thank you for joining us. One final question before we let you go. Who was your Jets 2023 MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, and Comeback Player of the Year?
All right, let's see. The MVP, I would go with Brees Hall. The
Okay.
offensive player of the year, I would go with Garrett Wilson. Defensive player of the year, I would go with Jermaine Johnson.
Mm.
And what's the last one?
Coach of the Year. So any coach on this whole staff.
Any coach on the whole staff, I'd give it to Brick, the defense coordinator, and his
Coach you.
entire staff, on defense. I
I
think
agree.
that they just did an excellent job keeping everybody together. Quality players, quality player. You know, the last game I played, I retired in '91. Been doing the radio now, going on 22 years, and I've been very fortunate and blessed that the players that now coming in and playing, I retired before they were even born.
Yep.
And I'm very grateful that they show me the respect as a former player and the respect as somebody up there in the booth. And they know that they can trust me. If they do the right thing, I'm going to tell the people on the radio they did the right thing. If they make a mistake, unfortunately, I have to tell them. Again, I'm not trying to be negative, just being honest.
I agree. Mr. Lyons, thank you for joining us. Everyone, thank you for watching. And as always, JETS, 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 Jets.
All right, Connor, stay well, buddy.